Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I am Mary Fran Bontempo with my buddy, Kristen Smedley, and today we just have one of my favorite people in the world, Beth Allen of DIYHipChicks. She and I met a number of years ago. I don't even remember how long it was, probably 6, 7, 8, I don't know, but immediate kindred spirits, immediate soul sisters. I just love her. You will recognize her from all sorts of things. In fact, I'm going to read a little bit of a bio because she's just got so much to tell. We have so much to tell you about. So she's the founder of DIYHipChicks, which is Home Improvement Project Chicks.
Yes.
She's funny, sassy, tenacious. I can attest to all of this. Chick on a mission to empower women to be smart, capable, and confident homeowners. Her trademark is, this is hilarious. Her trademark is teaching women how to screw and hammer too.
And the screwdriver and the hammer.
Beth is a DIY expert, speaker, designer, licensed contractor, married mother of 3 boys, former nurse, RN, who has been featured on Rachel Ray and Philly TV programs over 100 times. YouTube channel with, and I can say this, amazing videos of DIY stuff, over 2.2 million views. She has a soon-to-be published book called Flush the Fear, which aims to empower women to eliminate fear, anxiety, and negative energy from their lives. And she has a big goal of this is so cool, a mobile home improvement outreach program for underserved homeowners, a DIYHipChicks mobile classroom in an old school bus. How cool is that?
I will not be driving the bus. I will hire someone to do it.
When Kristen and I drive the bus figuratively, it always goes way off course. So
I drive roller coasters. I don't drive buses. I drive roller coasters.
So welcome to my buddy and my amazingly talented friend, Beth Allen.
Thank you.
Yay!
Yay!
So happy you're here.
All the power tools.
So the first thing, because it's just the first thing that hits the eye. I just need a brief description of your background and everything because it's so cool.
Oh, my little backdrop?
Your little studio back there, because we ran through it before we got on the air, and Kristen and I were just dying laughing at all of the cool stuff that you have. So that's a tool bench behind you.
It is a tool bench. It is honestly a cheap ass tool bench that I paid $70 for, but it was red. So I had to have it because that's my color, because red is powerful and passionate and strong. So that's why I love red. So I got my workbench. So I had to decorate around it. So I created a studio in my basement so that I can shoot and I can, film whenever I want to and just have a space to go where I can conduct classes and just do little, pop-ups here and there on Facebook or YouTube. But I've got some cool things. This was an $8 gadget I found at Home Goods with nails, had my name all over it.
I thought that was like one of those weird little light things, and then you brought it close to the camera earlier, and it was nails.
No fiber optics.
Oh my God.
So for the people on the podcast, it is like a topiary made out of nails.
Yes. Yeah.
It looks like a little firework of real galvanized nails. And you don't know what a galvanized nail is, but it means it's coated so it won't rust. But it's just super cool. And then behind me is a red toolbox. And that was the toolbox that my uncle, Eddie, who was just the salt of the earth, great guy, passed like almost 30 years ago. And I do a homeless collection every year in his memory. And he gave that toolbox to his sister, my aunt, when she got her first apartment, because he believed that a woman should be able to take care of herself. So when I started doing all of this, my aunt passed it down to me. So I have Uncle Eddie's toolbox, which is probably from 1960s or 70s. So I carry it around and bring it to demonstrations and presentations. So
I have to tell you this, Beth, when my divorce journey started 3 years ago, for Christmas, it was in October that my ex-husband left. And for Christmas, I have 4 brothers. My dad and my 4 brothers, who are all like, half of them are union, like they were always doing stuff at our house, right? They gave me a blazing pink toolbox and all of the tools were pink, because that was my dad's thing. He's like, you're not calling him to come back and fix anything, and he didn't want anything mixed up in where, you know, in the divorce where things were going. All the pink was mine, and I use it. It has to be every day that I'm using that toolbox, figuring out how to fix things.
Yeah. And
I do want to talk about spackle at some point. Like, I know we have to reset, rise, and reveal brilliance, but we have to talk spackle at some point because I'm obsessed. Anyway,
we can talk spackle later. We can tackle spackle.
That was her thing. You have to work in spackle today. I'm like, oh, for God's sake. Okay.
No, well, I just wish they would make a really great spackle for your face.
I know,
that would,
right?
Like, fill in all the cracks and the the
I always
lines.
say that I have to spackle and paint myself into place in the morning. You know, fill in the holes and the cracks and all that stuff.
I have to introduce you to Henrietta. This is Henrietta. I had her custom made, well, semi-custom made a few years ago. I got her back from the seamstress, and she was cute, but she wasn't sassy, and she needed to be sassy.
She's a chicken.
So she was, she's a little chicken. So Henrietta Hip Chick. So what I did was I cut the head off the chicken. I actually have pictures of this from years ago when I did it. I cut the head off the chicken, and then I went out and bought more fabric, and I took a Minnie Mouse doll.
Sorry, Disney.
Cut her apart. So the comb on Henrietta is Minnie's little high heels. The beak is from another part of Minnie, I don't remember, but I cut it up and restitched it. These are Minnie's eyes, if she looks familiar, because she's Minnie.
And her eyelashes.
And her eyelashes. And she even has little yellow earrings. So
you have to do an Instagram story of this whole massacre and rebuild.
The rebirth of Henrietta. So
Minnie leading to the rebirth of Henrietta.
I know. And Henrietta, I just picked it because she's a chicken and it made sense, but it's a German name. Even though I'm not German, it means ruler of the house. And being that I am the only woman in a house with 4 men, I am ruler of the house. So It works out just perfect.
It was perfect. I mean, and you didn't even know that when you picked the name Henrietta. You found that out after the fact, right?
Yeah. Like a year later, I Googled it for some reason. I'm like, oh, how funny is that? But yeah, that's, I guess, why we have the hen house, Henrietta's, you know.
Yeah.
So,
there you go. All things are ultimately ordained by a power greater than us. And when we have good intentions, things work out surprisingly sometimes like that.
And then the strange coincidences that round things.
Yeah. Yeah. Serendipity. So you and I go back quite a ways, and we've done a lot of projects and everything together. And I think people most know you through your amazing DIY stuff and everything that you do along those lines. But you have a book coming out, and the real focus of that book, and this is where I feel like we want to share this reset, rise, and reveal that we talk about all the time. Your reset started when you were very young. You were around 20 years old or so. With a highly charged emotional situation with your mom, and that kind of altered the course of your life from that point on. So would you share a little bit about that with us?
Absolutely. When I was probably in my teens, I guess I was probably 16 or 17, my mom had a hysterectomy. It was an emergency hysterectomy. She hadn't seen a gynecologist since I'd been born. She was very afraid of going to doctors, which is very typical of that generation. So she didn't go to the doctor. She ended up with a uterine fibroid the size of a grapefruit. She was hemorrhaging. She had an immediate hysterectomy, blood transfusions, you know, the whole bit. And after that, her entire personality changed. She was always a dominant force in our family, that was for sure. But I think some of her filters came down, and she started really struggling emotionally with depression and anxiety. And at that same time, I, the youngest of 3, was starting to grow away, because that's what you do at 18, 19, 20 years old. And it was 2 storms that had just collided together. And I was growing up and away, and she was looking to keep me down because she needed me in her world more than I needed her at that time. And it was perfectly normal and healthy transition on my part, but she wasn't prepared. And it the normal happy household that I believed that I had grown up in started to just crumble. And she became very narcissistic, controlling. And it got to the point after about 2 years of her threatening suicide almost daily for months. And a lot of manipulation, a lot of control. And I was studying psych in nursing school at the time. I mean, of all coincidences. Wow. And I remember one day challenging her. And I said, if you're going to try it, go ahead, because I will have you committed as fast as you can blink. And she kind of backed off. So there was an element of manipulation. There was also an element of, she was really suffering with anxiety and depression and her loss of purpose, and her role was changing, and so many things that so many women go through at that period of time when their children need them less. And I am at that point right now. You know, my sons are 22, 19, and 17, and they don't need me as much, you know, and I had to make sure that I found my own purpose and my own thing so that I didn't end up putting that kind of pressure of purpose on my children. But at 20 years old, things were really bad. And there was a day, and I can tell you like it was yesterday, that I eyed up a telephone pole on Route 611 that I thought I would drive my car into coming home from work. And I remember thinking I could just put it all to rest. I could just stop all this stress, all this pain, all this chaos for her and for me. And then something hit me upside the head and said, what the hell are you thinking? And I was really blessed that one of the physicians at the hospital sensed that I was falling apart. And he was, you know, a great guy, my mother's age. And he pulled me into an empty exam room one night. And he's like, what the heck's going on? Because you're not on your game. And I just lost it. And if you know me well, you know I cry easily and I'm pretty open.
You
so
do cry easily.
Oh my God, it's
cries
awful.
at the drop of a hat, but it's always happy tears. It's always like, oh, did you see that? So nice. Oh my gosh.
I do cry when I'm sad, but
meanwhile, I'm looking at her going, what is your problem?
Yeah. The tin man that's like, what is that?
I know. I'm like, well, okay. You know, I'm like, I'm always crying. So the doctor pulled me aside and basically said to me that I was not responsible for my mother's well-being and for her happiness. And no one had ever told me that. No one had ever said you are not responsible to make her or any other human being in your life happy. That, you know, you're responsible for you. So I started going to therapy about 2 weeks later, and it really started to change things for me. And then I moved out of my parents' house. And when I made the decision to move out, I was essentially cut off. So I moved out July 1st of 1990, what was that, 3? I think, no, sorry, 92. And I never went back. And the emotional part of the relationship got worse to the point that mom didn't come to my wedding, even though we went and asked her to be a part of it. My dad walked me down the aisle, but my mom did not want to be a part of it. It was rough. So there I was at 21, basically abandoned emotionally by my parents and financially, physically. You know, I was on my own. And I remember living paycheck to paycheck, going to school full time while I was finishing my bachelor's in nursing, but I was fortunate that I was already an RN through an associate program. So I was working part-time as an RN and going to school full-time, trying to manage an apartment and bills and all of that my senior year of college. And I got through it. Fortunately, my husband, boyfriend at the time, was a big support, but I lived alone for 2 years, and I tell you, it was the most empowering experience to have to fend for yourself for 2 years. And, and I really think it's important for young women to have that.
That's one of the things I was going to ask you. I mean, at that point, you had so much emotional trauma that was inflicted by your mom. Was it, as despite suddenly having to take care of yourself and all those things, was it almost like a relief? Did you almost like welcome it? Like, I mean, obviously there's a level of fear and whatever going out on your own the first time, but just the idea that you could put aside that and deal with the business of life without all that emotional baggage. Was that freeing for you?
It was. It was freeing because anybody who's in a traumatic relationship or a challenging relationship, whether it's a difficult marriage, whether it's dealing with a son with heroin, going through divorce, living on eggshells day after day sucks. It's
does.
awful, and it hurts, and it eats away at a part of you. And when I did finally get into my own space, yeah, I could go to sleep at night and feel peaceful and calm. I didn't have to worry that mom was going to be knocking on my bedroom door in a fit of anger because she got stirred up by something and wanted to talk to me or yell at me. And so I remember sleeping with my door locked. I mean, she was never physically, aggressive, but it was just the emotional, at me. And I didn't share a whole lot with my siblings at the time. They had both just started new marriages, and they were 10 years older and kind of further in life. And I tried to really burden it a lot by myself. It was my husband and my in-laws that got me through it, and therapy, and a network of other women that I worked with, nurses who were nurturing, who kind of pulled me in and gave me support and guidance. And I've had this pay it forward attitude ever since, because those women really helped save me at a time when I didn't feel like I was worthy of being saved.
Yeah, that whole tribe idea. I mean, Kristen and I talk about that all the time. And, members of your tribe will change over time. But if you are open to that, and if you put your hand up and go, hey, I'm drowning over here, I need some help, it's amazing how immediately people will respond, because you think to yourself, I would do that for someone else. So clearly, if you have that mentality, others have it. So when you put your hand up and you ask for help, there are always people there that are willing to step in.
Absolutely.
I'm interested, I don't want to go too far into the psychology of stuff and all that, but when you left and when you were going through it, I mean, is there something in you? Have you always been the kind of person that can not take it in so deep into your own? Because I know what that personality is like that you're talking about, that your mom got into, that narcissistic and the eggshells and all that. And they tend to rewire your brain that it's all you. And they create this false reality that never actually happened. And it is like a mental, it almost causes a mental breakdown if you don't get out of it in time.
Yeah. It is mental torture. It really is. I was always my father's daughter. My father was always the optimist. He was always the be happy, look at things on the bright side. So I was lucky that I had that core mentality that helped me not take so much of it and apply it so deeply. But you have to remember that when I was growing up, I walked on water in my mother's eyes. I was the sun, the moon, and the stars. She told me how pretty I was, how capable I could do anything in the world that I wanted, as long as she was the center of everything that I did.
Yes.
And it was when she became less of the center that I really saw the narcissistic behavior. And I mean, I love my mother even to the day she died. See, Mary fan? There
she goes.
But there's a point that loving someone doesn't mean you have to have them in your life, because it's not healthy. And that was the point that I got to. And people have said to me over the years, oh, it's such a shame you didn't have your mother in your life. And I said, it is a shame. I said, but I am healthier because I didn't have her intensely involved in my everyday life.
Yep.
And I have a better marriage. I'm a better mother because I didn't have that challenge of trying to navigate her in all of that. And it is a shame because she missed out on 3 great kids, and we have a nice life. And I lived 10 minutes from her for the last 27 years. And, that was the big kicker.
For my kids, I couldn't get past it. And one of the things that Mary Fran always says is stop being so married to the outcome. Stop being so married to the vision that everybody has for a quote family, even families that split and all of that. Stop being so married to that. And I actually had somebody very close to me say, your problem is that your parents were so amazing that, they're like my best friends. And I couldn't get my head around an unhealthy parent. I just couldn't, and to one of the points that you said, and I'm so happy to hear you on the other side of this saying the same thing that somebody told me was, and it was like doctors, therapists, everybody said, as long as there's a healthy parent in the situation, a healthy adult, then a kid ends up okay. They become resilient. They know that what's normal and what isn't normal. But man, watching kids go through stuff that you're talking about, how was your dad with that?
My dad adored my mother. He worshiped her. She could do no wrong, yet he knew she did a lot of wrong. You know what I mean? And he adored me. We were very close, but he said to me at one point, he said, if I have to choose between her and you, I know you'll figure it out on your own. I was 20 years old.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he adored me, but he didn't have the strength to deal with her. He didn't have the courage to stand up to her.
Yeah.
In that
And
situation, he then would have become the target.
yeah, and he couldn't deal with it. He just wanted everybody to just get along and be happy. And he was a very simple guy, a hardworking guy. He wanted everything to be pleasant, and it just killed him. I could see how it was just eating away at him. And after I moved out, I mean, he came to my wedding. He came to the hospital when my first son was born. And I ran into him one day in a store with my son on my hip, and I could see it destroyed him. Just destroyed him. But he didn't have the courage to say to my mom, I'm having a relationship with our daughter. I don't really care what you have to say about it. He couldn't navigate that.
It shows you the profound hold and damage that people in that mental state can inflict on other people, to the point, like you said, Kristen, where it almost rewires your brain. I mean, and when you said, what you said, Beth, about you can love someone but not want to be near them and want to be around them, I immediately flashed back to David and his height of his addiction. I mean, I love this child, but the day he left for rehab was one of the best days of my life. Exactly. I slept that night for the first time in I don't know how long, because I was not being subjected to that constant emotional abuse, which is what those situations are. It wears you down. It eats you up.
Yeah.
But I want to go back now, though, and kind of shift gears a little bit, because you went on to create this amazing brand and amazing life. But I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, because your mom passed away recently.
Yes.
And you found something in her house when you went to clean things out that indicated to you that as much as you had no relationship, you were still a part of her.
Yes. Going back into that house was tough after she passed. I was lucky. I was bedside with my brother and sister when she passed. I told her I loved her and that I'm sorry for all the lost time. I believe she heard before she passed. But going through the house, I was back there for the third time in 27 years after she passed.
Wow.
So I'm going through her stuff. I'm going through my childhood stuff. I'm in my bedroom. I mean, it's just like, it was just so much emotion. But I found in her closet a box. And in the box was every card and letter, photo of my children, everything I had sent over the last 27 years.
Wow.
All there. And letters that she had written to me and never mailed. Birthday cards she signed and never mailed. So it was validation that I was loved. But I say this in the book, and this was the most profound thing that hit me through all of this, is that my mother's mental illness was simply stronger than her love for me. And that's it. You know, I realize now that she had depression, anxiety, narcissistic personality disorder, and I believe borderline personality disorder was a huge piece of it. Fear of abandonment. Her dad died when she was 5. My grandmother moved she and her 3 siblings back to Ireland, to a shack in the middle of Ireland with no plumbing, no electricity, not even an outhouse. They literally went in the grass. So they went from a townhouse in Philly to living in poverty in rural Ireland for 5 years. And then they came back. And I can only imagine the trauma that brought to a 5-year-old child. And I think she never healed from the trauma, and she never worked through it. So she lived in constant fear of loss and abandonment. And if you don't work through your shit, you can never be whole. There's no other way to say it.
That's the quote of the century, because, and then the problem is when you don't work through your shit,
You pass it on.
it perpetuates. Yes.
Mhm.
And it takes somebody like you and all of that heartache to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And thank God you broke it early in your family tree, you know, as opposed to letting it, I've unfortunately experienced it go through generations, and no one ever figures it out. Then it takes a massive blow and somebody coming, you know, falling to pieces and getting destroyed almost, to then build it back up, that there's that, we cut it off, just cut off the whole cycle of it. But you know, this whole narcissistic mental disorder is the world is so uneducated about it. And I mean,
And it is so incredibly powerful. I mean, it has the power to touch and destroy so many people. You know, we all know that person that we might think of as, oh, they're just such a witch, you know, or, oh, he's just an angry, miserable person. That person is hurting. You know, like when I speak of my mom over the years, people have always said to me, you always speak of her very kindly. And I said, of course I do, because she wasn't a bad person. She just didn't work on herself. She just didn't do the work that she needed to do to be a whole person. And there's nothing wrong or bad or evil about any of that. It's just she didn't know enough. She was afraid. And that's why I wrote the whole book, was that if we have to push past our fears, we have to let go of our anxiety, all our negative shit, because when we do that, we can then fully embrace what we're supposed to do in this world. And had she done that, she had so much talent. It wasn't my dad that taught me how to fix anything. It was my mom. I was 17 under the kitchen sink putting in a new faucet with her. 15, I remember we cut a hole in a wall in our house and installed a ventilation fan. My dad came home from work. He's like, what the hell? We had run electric. We put in a switch. You know, I mean, all this crazy stuff. And now, last summer, there I was back at my mom's house, taking care of these things that I had done with her. And I remember wallpapering the stairwell. We had a ladder prop like this. We had a hamper on the end of the hall on the upper step, and we had a plank. And I remember being 10 years old, climbing the scaffolding with her, wallpapering. So there I am repainting this hallway last summer, and the flashbacks and the emotion. And, you know, I've said before, and I say in the book, I couldn't fix my mom, but I fixed her house. And I brought it back to a whole state, and we sold it, and it was cute, and it was fresh, and it was filled with light and love again. And I feel like I did my job.
That's wonderful.
Now in the
And
book,
it's interesting to me, I'm sorry, Kristen, what were you going to say?
Yeah.
That's interesting to me that your whole career has been about fixing things.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fixing people.
yeah, from nursing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was just clearly
That's that
something.
innate skill that we talk about. It transferred to all the different places of your life.
Yeah.
Wow.
And my kids will tell you that when they come to me and they're frustrated about something, my immediately thought is, well, how do we fix it? Like, I go into that fixer mentality.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my husband told me that I need to channel the Olivia Pope from Scandal mentality of a fixer and be relentless and, you know, persistent and all of those things. So.
But I think you are. You just do it in a kind, you know, a kinder, gentler way. And I mean, you're funny and you're sassy and all that, but there's a genuine kindness about that. And that is where, you know, I've seen that. I've attended some of your workshops, you know, about things, and I can remember one in particular where I was sitting with my mom and you said something and I just started to laugh, and you literally told me to stop it from the middle of it, from your, I mean,
I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, but it was something about something you said, and of course I took it to another level. It was about a part.
There's a lot of
inappropriate,
sexual innuendos in home repair things. And yes, I do remember that now, that you took an alternate meaning of something.
I did. I'm
making
sorry
me laugh.
about that. That was
Way
just
to
really
go,
fun.
Mary Fran. Way to class it up. Way to
You know.
class it up. Good thing I'm here. Good thing I'm here.
Oh yeah, that
That's
makes
so
the
funny.
difference.
Well, you guys talk about the fact that I seem to have been able to kind of be resilient about all of that and kind of ward off a lot of the negative stuff that I went through. And yes and no. There's a piece of me that is very like, just go out and do it. Like start a YouTube channel, reach out to Rachel Ray and say, hey, put me on your show, and not be afraid to do that. But there's been a piece of me for 27 years that has really questioned her worth.
Mm.
And it wasn't until Mom passed that I really feel like it's come full circle. I started this book 4 years ago, and it was all over the place, and it didn't have heart and it didn't have clarity. But when my mom passed and I realized that my value was not based on her loving me, that was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said to my husband after Mom died, nothing's going to hold me back anymore.
Do you think that even at that time, even after all of those years of you creating and living this life, that there was still this part of you that still had that little bit of, I'm not there yet because my mom's
I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
That whole mentality, absolutely. Because when your own mother chooses not to be a part of your life,
Mm-hmm.
you can't help but question why
Yeah.
anybody else would.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so
And
true.
it's not even just a mom. It's that narcissist mentality. That's sometimes the way that they can rewire your brain that you will never, ever be enough. And then, I have been on the other side of the other thing that in that personality disorder is they rip you to shreds so that they look way better than
Mm-hmm.
you. And I was just saying this on one of our shows the other day about, we were doing the thing with Max Lucado, you'll get through this, and God uses the mess for a message. And I'm like, dude, there is no message and something like that. But I did figure it out. I figured out that I was such the, only girl, Catholic woman, blah, 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 people pleaser. And I needed everybody to like me, right? My whole life, I just had a personality people tended to hang out with. And then it became like in that horrific, toxic relationship, that became my thing. Like people had to like me because I was in this horrible thing saying, you're terrible, you're terrible. So then when you go through that mental personality disorder does the whole ripping you apart and the smear campaigns and all that, that's what I had to learn from it. That it does not matter what people think.
Yes. Yeah. One person's inability to appreciate what you have to offer is not how you value yourself.
No.
And it's really hard to get that through your head, especially when it's a spouse, a child, a parent, that these people that should be there for you unconditionally, but aren't.
Yeah.
And that it's never about you. It's about them and having their stuff. And it's not a reflection on you. It's really, really hard to get through that. And for the grace of God, my husband pulled me through.
And do you have in the book, do you go through some of the things the resources that got you through that whole mental stuff? Is that what it addressed?
I do. It's called Flush the Fear because I just stumbled upon this goofy analogy of toilets, and I love toilets. I spent a lot of time. I love toilets. Look,
Another question later.
I've got my toilet mug. I've got everything here.
I literally saw you it was that same night that I went to that thing. And I'm not kidding you, Kristen, this was the funniest thing. So I bring my mother to this thing and I tell my mother, oh, my friend Beth and blah, blah, blah. We happened to pull up into the parking lot at the exact same time. And here is Beth literally pulling a toilet out of her car to bring it into this place. And I'm like, oh my God. Sorry, Mom, but she's really good, I promise.
Yes, I bring toilets places. Well, I spent years as a nurse around toilets. I spent years raising 3 boys, cleaning toilets, and now I fix them. So, it just kind of made sense. Natural. But I just came up with this idea of, flushing your crap and flushing the fear. And then I realized, how do I work in what I do? And realized that self-improvement is the greatest do-it-yourself project we can ever do.
Wow.
And
I love that.
so if you can take the tools from my toolbox and apply them to your self-improvement, there's a lot of power in that. So then I came up with the one chapter about the hammer, and that the hammer is a tool for connecting, and that to get through our stuff, we have to be connected. We need to have our tribe. We need to share. We need to open up. And if we're not going to connect with other people, we're never going to be able to deal with all of the burdens that we have. And I look back at my mom's life. She didn't have a lot of friends. And the few friends that she did, they were all surface friends. She was never able to just go there with people. And that was her biggest downfall, was that she walled herself off. And if she had connected, if she had been a hammer and connected with people and been vulnerable and opened up, her life would have been very different, because she would have understood so much more of all the psychology of the family dynamics and growing and changing. So, you know, I tell a story about I think it's like 9 or 10 different tools, and how each of them has a meaning. You know, the table saw, which is the mother of all saws, you know, it can do the most damage. That's a tool about courage, and that you have to plow through the stuff that sits in front of you. And you have to be relentless and unapologetic, and you have to be powerful in your own life. So I use the tools as metaphors to teach different ways that you can kind of get over things.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. Because the table saw, man, you got to have some courage, and you got to be pretty badass to be handling that sucker. And it's cool.
Yeah, I've had bruises to prove. Yeah, I call it, it's actually, the chapter is the mother of all saws.
But it is so perfect, because in order to have courage, I mean, if you have courage, you're going to get banged up. I mean, you know, just because you say, hey, I'm brave, I'm going to go through this, you're going to get banged up. And, and that's a part of this whole process, to not be, I was going to say to not be afraid, but that's not true. To be afraid, but to do it anyway. Yeah. Yeah. Because we're never not going to be afraid. You know, exactly. I use the wrench as an analogy for opportunities, whereas life presents us nuts, and we have to be a wrench and grab hold of the nuts. And of course, everybody snickers and giggles when I talk about grabbing the nuts. But it's about everything she says, you can take it in another direction. It's hilarious.
So, you know, I talk about the opportunity, you know, to go on television, and how the first time I was offered that opportunity, I was terrified. And my first fear was I going to look fat on television? Like, that was the first thing that went through my head. But I had to push through that. And then I've ended up on TV 100 times. So at least, but you know, it's about looking at life, and I'm a visual learner. So for me, in the book, I have a photo of every tool.
Oh, thank God. I'm visual too.
Yeah. Because you can look at it again and be like, yeah, I get that. I can see that. And if they walk away with the remembering, you know, the photo of the hammer with the nail, and that they connect, that there's power in all of those analogies. So
wow, I love it. You know what I love too about all this? So I said that my dad and my brothers always were Fixit people, right? And my in my house growing up, when my mom wanted something done, it was never top of the list. They always had a wall they were removing, and she just wanted a picture hung. But we always would joke, all she would do is grab the hammer and walk through the room, acting going to go. And then all of a sudden, everybody was jumping to do it. But having had all of that growing up, you know, for some reason, this whole, and I think a lot of women go through this when, you know, you go through divorce and all that, and you just want somebody to do all that for you. So sometimes I get into this pit where I'm like, oh, I just wish somebody else could fix the sump pump. I just wish, you know, and I just did it again last week. I'm like, man, I want to redo these rooms, but then I got to take all the screws out that I put in. I never should have done it that way. And I have to fix the holes. And I was so in the pit for a day again, like, why isn't there anybody that I can blah, 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 my life, and I'm almost 50 years old. And then I'm like, would you shut up and go to the hardware store? You know, I had this whole conversation with like Mary Fran in my head, shut up, you know, put your almost 50-year-old self together. Got the spackle, found the greatest spackle in the world. And that, you should see me with my kids. I spackled the wall, and it's the quick dry stuff and all. And I sanded it, and I'm like, you guys, look, when I did it and I painted, I have like the, you know, the blind kids' hands on it. Look, there are no bumps.
It's smooth.
And the kids were like, my daughter looks at me, who I'm thinking is, I mean, she's almost 16. So I'm like, Carissa is watching me as her role model, right?
Absolutely.
Or sit and cry or figure it out. And she's been watching me do that, you know, with the lawnmowers and all this crazy stuff. So
It's okay to cry and have the pity party.
Yeah.
Then you figure it out.
And then you cheer when the lawnmower finally starts and all. Every time I start it, I cheer. I'm standing there and I'm so excited over this spackle. And I'm like, Carissa, do you see what I did? I spackle, blah, blah, blah. I go through this whole thing. She was like, it's really great, Mom. You've been in quarantine entirely too long. You have some friends you can socially distance with. I was like, someone call Governor Wolf and open this damn state.
Get her out of the house, for the love of God.
Take the spackle away. Oh, that's so funny.
Motivation. Now I'm just losing my mind.
Oh my God. That's so funny.
So,
You know, but it's true. You know, and I say this in every one of the live classes that I teach before we even start, you know, our Tool Basics 101. I say to the women in the class, we as women have the ability to give birth to a human being. Why are you intimidated by a toilet bolted to the floor? Seriously.
what's it going to do? It can't run away from you. It's not going to answer you back.
It's an inanimate object that's bolted to the bathroom floor. Why do you let it intimidate you?
Wow.
And I have so many women that, just like you, they chuckle and they're like,
Huh.
yeah, I get it. You know,
I've handled way worse. I mean,
I
every
say
woman
that.
can say that. Well, every woman can say that.
Yes.
You've handled way worse than this.
Right. You've had your hands in worse shit than the toilet. So, you know, I mean, in honesty, it is. You know, we've overcome, you know, putting ourselves through poverty situations and divorce and children in, you know, addiction or losing parents and cancer and all of these horrible challenges. And we come through them and we're still smiling. So it's like, don't tell me you can't spackle or you can't hang a picture or you can't fix the flapper. Come on.
Yeah.
Man up, right?
Man up. Yeah. All right. So we could continue this conversation for another 3 hours or days
Probably.
or just endlessly. But I want people to know where they can find you. And when the book is not out just yet, is it?
No, it's
Okay.
it's being formatted. So
Okay.
it will be out in June.
Yay.
And I'm also excited that in June, I'm going to be launching the first and only of its kind anywhere in the world, because I have searched high and low. I am offering a deep dive comprehensive homeowner course that will walk people through 10 common repairs and problems in their house. And then also they get a year of a Facebook group with me and Zoom calls. So that's basically me in their back pocket for a year to help them work through their home repairs.
That's fantastic. That's
Moving
fantastic.
toilets.
Now, where do we access all this stuff? Where do we find all this?
If people go to my website and sign up for my newsletter at DIYHipChicks.com, that's the best place to just connect, because from there you can go to YouTube, Facebook, but all of the info and the programs that I have will all come out via the newsletter. So that's the best place to connect.
Awesome. That's terrific.
Awesome.
Well, this has just been beyond delightful, as I knew it would be, because you're my buddy, and I just appreciate your spirit and your experiences and the way you share them with such authenticity. So you have been a gift to us and our viewers today. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And of course I cried. So.
Of course you cried. I knew that was a given. That was going to happen no matter where this conversation went. I knew you were going to cry. So anyway, check out my buddy Beth Allen and Hip Chicks. Look for this new book because it is amazing. I've been lucky enough to read parts of it, and it's really wonderful. And again, thanks to everybody for tuning in to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live, and we will see you tomorrow.
See ya.